the dot in the bet, there is a bit of a difference between the dot in the bet and the dot in the dalet. It's not a difference that can be seen. The dot looks exactly the same, but the reason, the type of the dagesh that is represented by each dot is different. What kind of a dagesh do we have in each of these?
Well, the Dagesh in the bet is the dot for the PL. The one in the Dalet might have a nun that's missing, but I'm guessing.
Okay, so the dagesh in the bet is indeed because of the PL, and this is a strong dagesh. It's a dagesh that indicates the duplication of the consonant. So we should pronounce it. Not many people really do pronounce it that way. Something like daberu with a b, kind of an emphasis, kind of a almost a duplication of that consonant. Okay, so that's a strong dagesh. The dagesh in the dalet is a weak dagesh. Anyone remembers how to distinguish between the strong dagesh and the weak dagesh?
It's a lene dagesh, which means weak, and
right, dagesh lene. That is correct. These are the Latin terms for these.
It's a hard sound for D rather than a soft sound like TH.
Yeah, but how do we distinguish, not in the pronunciation, but how do we know when a dagesh is strong and when a dagesh is weak? They look exactly the same.
Well, if it's the first letter of the word, I think that's
okay. Very good. So first letter of the word would never get a strong dagesh. Okay. A weak dagesh would never come after a vowel. A strong dagesh comes after a vowel. So, for instance, in the case of the word daberu that is on screen, you can see there is a dagesh in the bet following a vowel. Let me highlight it. You can see there is a dagesh before that bet. Okay? And here there is a dagesh before there is a vowel before the dagesh in the zayin. And here there is a vowel before the dagesh in the bet, in labait. Do you see all of these examples, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, very good.
Yes, yes.
Right. All of the other examples where you don't have dagesh before, for instance, in the daled of daberu, no dagesh before, no vowel before it, I mean, or in the bet of be'asor, or in yeah, that's in the kaf of kol, no vowel before it, makes it a weak dagesh. You're right, it is, as you can see, all of these examples are at the beginning of words, which is very common for us to see a weak dagesh at the letters bet, gimel, dalet, kaf, bet, taf at the beginning of words. But the common denominator of these weak dageshes is that they're not preceded by a vowel. And the strong dageshes are. Okay? So that's daberu. And so you can see, because when we talk about the morphology of a word, the weak dageshes are irrelevant. Weak dageshes are just for phonetic reasons, not for morphological reasons. They don't indicate the binyan. Okay. So,
but what I still don't understand, what exactly does the weak dagesh mean?
Okay, very good. So that means that we're going deeper, diving deeper. The weak dagesh, what it does is okay. Let's closing this so you can see my video bigger because I'm gonna demonstrate on myself. Everybody sees me, guys?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Very
Yeah.
good.
Yes.
Very good. Now I'm gonna talk about consonants and vowels. What consonants and how they are different. What is the difference between a consonant and a vowel phonetically? Guys, anyone knows what's the difference between a consonant and a vowel? Just from a phonetic standpoint, from even a physiological standpoint. What's the difference between the two?
For a vowel, you don't need the tongue or the lips.
Very good. You don't use the tongue or the lips or the teeth or the back of the tongue, which is part of the tongue, right? And that's generally speaking because in a vowel, you don't interfere with a free flow of the air coming out of your lungs. So, there is a free flow of the air coming out all the way from the lungs out through the speaking mechanism that we have here to the world. There is a full opening. What happens with a consonant? Oh, with a consonant, we already have a certain interference. Okay, that interference could differ based on the level of stoppage or interference that we ran with these consonants. It could be a complete stopping of the air, like B. Okay, you noted I stopped the air at my lips. Be that with the letter B, with the letter P, with the letter M. Okay, with the letter W, almost very close. The lips are together with a W. W, wheat. Okay, almost like B, M, and P. There could be stoppage of the air in a different place, like at the back of the throat, K, like with a K, with a like the palate, not the back of the throat as much as the palate, or the T, where the air completely stops. There could be cases where the air is not completely stopped, but somewhat stopped. Okay, there is not a free flow of the air coming out, but not a full stoppage. Give me examples for consonants that allow some of the air flow, but stop some of the air while pronouncing them.
V.
V. Very good. You said V, right? Right. Some of the air is flowing,
F.
not freely. You said F. Someone said F.
Yeah.
Very good. F.
H.
So H is the there is something at the back of the throat with the H, but that's the idea. You have free flow is a vowel, and with the consonants you have different levels of stoppage. So far, are you with me, guys?
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is interesting.
Yes.
Very good. Now, going back to your question, guys, what is a weak dagesh? A weak dagesh is when a consonant that was supposed to be was supposed to oh, it's the other way around, okay? The originally the letters bet, gimel, dalet, kaf, pe, and tav, the beged kefet letters. Okay, I'm going back to use the board and We'll clean the board so we can write it on the board. Bear with me. Okay. And let's write it on screen. Right. The letters Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Kaf, Pe, and Tab. Those Beged, Kefet letters in which we may find the weak Dagesh. These letters are okay. Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Kav, Pe, and Tav, sometimes referred to as Beged Kefet or Begad Kafat. Okay, these are the letters where we may find the Dagesh. Okay, originally they were stopping consonant, always, which means their pronunciation was such that stops the air completely. Okay, so the bet was always pronounced as b. Let's use a different color. And the gimel was always g. And the daled was always d. And the kaf was always k. And the pei was always p. And the tav was always t. So the original pronunciation of all of these 6 letters was a plosive pronunciation, a stopping pronunciation, a pronunciation that completely stops the air. That's the original pronunciation of all of these. Are you with me so far?
Yeah.
Very good. And that's the original. However, sometimes phonetic circumstances cause change in the way we pronounce words. Think of English. How do you pronounce this letter? So really it depends. Okay? If it really depends where it is. Okay, so if it's in the beginning of the word sky, so it's s. Okay? But let's say it's at the end of the word. Calls. I'm receiving very interesting calls lately. Okay? So it's pronounced like a Z sound. Right?
Right.
What about that?
It's
And then the
the same
letters
letter.
changes with the vowel, different vowels.
So, just a second, going back to these 6 letters, since they represent the full stopping of the air, okay, when they came after a full flowing of the air, which is, as you remember, what is the full flowing of the air? We demonstrated before.
A vowel.
Oh.
A vowel.
A vowel, very good. When these letters came after a vowel, the speakers of ancient Hebrew, in a natural way, they didn't have to learn it, okay? In a natural way, they pronounced them in a different way. When they came after a vowel, they pronounced them instead of a b, this one was more like a v sound. Instead of a hard G, g, this one was maybe r or j. No, I'm not getting into what was the original, what was that alternative, but it was a fricative sound rather than a plosive, a sound that allowed some of the air. instead of a d, a hard D, maybe like th as in this. Okay. We represent that by a line underneath in Semitic transliteration. Instead of a k, something like a ch. Instead of a p, something like an f. Instead of a t, hard T, maybe something like th as in think. And that came naturally after a vowel. So when not following a vowel, we see the original plosive pronunciation. When following a vowel, it should lose the weak dagesh. Hence, if we see a dagesh following a vowel, we know it's not a weak dagesh, because a weak dagesh should not exist following a vowel. So I know that every dagesh that follows a vowel must be a strong dagesh, because if it were to be a weak dagesh, it would have fallen. It would have. Are you with me, guys? It wasn't.
Yeah.
Would the soft G be equivalent to a J?
That's a different question. I want to focus on understanding the process.
Okay.
So originally they were plosive. They were all stopping. B, g, g, k, p, t. Following a vowel, the Hebrews naturally kind of made this natural process of, instead of completely stopping the air, going from a free flow of the air represented by a vowel to a full stop of the air, they went halfway. They kind of, instead of b, they went av. That's going halfway. Okay, so that's the story of the weak dagesh. I know it's a little bit counterintuitive, because you think that the dagesh was added at certain circumstances, but it's really the other way around. The dagesh represents the consonant that existed originally, and the lack of the dagesh happens following a vowel. And that it is further complicated, because that is the indication of a strong dagesh, a dagesh that is added of different circumstances, because if it's following a vowel, I know it's not the weak dagesh. Okay? Okay, I know.
Yeah. Thank you.
Susanna, yeah.
Yeah, before they added the learning mothers,
The reading mothers.
the reading mothers, if they didn't have, say you had a bet, and you didn't have a vowel visible because they didn't add them, and you didn't see a dagesh in the b, would you know to pronounce it v?
So it's a good question. I've portrayed a process where the ancient Hebrews pronounced these consonants in a certain way, one way or another. But I did not say when that happened. Right? We only know that by the 8th, 9th century, this is represented by the system of the Nikud and Tamim that we see in the Masoretic text. It's very hard to pinpoint exactly when that process happened. Right? So it's your question is, you'll have to give me a date, okay? Saying, okay, what happened in around, let's say, the beginning of the Common Era, okay, in the time of Jesus, how did they pronounce it? Or in the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, how did they pronounce it? Or in the time of Hezekiah and Isaiah, it does not necessarily mean that all of these have the same answer. Remember, we're talking about a period that is 1,000 years.
That would be true with English too. So I suppose
Right, that would be true in English with English.
I was more wondering which came first, the Dagesh or the reading mothers.
Oh, the reading mothers came first.
Okay.
Okay, the Dagesh is part of the Masoretic system that developed in the 8th, 9th, 10th century. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
However, saying that the Dagesh came after does not mean it represents a pronunciation that came after. It's two different things. The
Gotcha.
graphic representation of the vowels or of the Dageshes is later to the concept of reading mothers, no doubt. But it doesn't mean that it records a tradition that is late. Now, having said that, sometimes we do have tools that enables us to say something about these things, even if we don't have the Nikud yet in late antiquities. And I'll give you an example. What do I mean by that? You know, the name of the grandson of Aaron, okay, the son of Elazar, the priest, who kills the
Pinchas.
right, but there is a reason I'm not using the Hebrew name. Not because I don't remember it. I do remember it. But I wanted to hear both the Hebrew pronunciation, as you said, but what's his name in English?
Phineas?
Phineas, right. We certainly do have a P sound in Greek, right? We all learned when we were young and handsome or beautiful, depending on our gender, that pi is 3.1415 whatever. So we know there is a Greek letter for the equivalent to P. That is the letter pi. Right? So why is this guy called Pinchas in Hebrew, while in English we call him
Phineas.
Phineas? Thank you very much. Anyone knows what was the name of the other wife of Elkanah? Elkanah had his wife Hannah.
Hannah and oh,
And what was the name of the other wife who wasn't the mother of Samuel?
no, I have a vague memory.
Open your Bible, 1 Samuel 1.
Was it Penina or Penina?
Yes, very good, Deborah. So Deborah is saying her name is Penina. And that is correct. Deborah reads her Hebrew Bible very well. But would you like to guess what's her Greek name? Or at least what would be the first letter of her? Coming in?
Fa.
Fenana, right. And not Penina, right? Even though the Greek has a letter for P, okay, when the Greeks or when the Greek writers are transcribing the name Penina, okay, they don't use the letter pi, but the letter phi. I'll put it on screen for everybody to see. Maybe I should have done it with other names as well. You can see the Greek name. Okay, Fenana. I don't like this font. I'll change the font. Ah, this is a better font. Do you see the Greek name Fenana? Right. Same goes for Pinchas that we've demonstrated already. So in both cases, and in other cases as well, okay, the Greek transcription of a Hebrew p sound is f, even though there is an alternative Greek p. What does it teach us about the pronunciation of the Hebrew at that time, at the time of the Septuagint, the writing of the Septuagint? Rosalind, did you want to say something?
After this, so it probably says that it was a soft sound with the f.
Right, but again, remember that we have two types of sounds. In the Hebrew, you have the one that we use with a dagesh, and the one that we use without a dagesh. Okay? And interestingly, both of them are transcribed in a similar way in the Greek text. When they transcribe something that in Hebrew uses pay, they use f. I cannot avoid another example, guys, which you all know, and is related to the month we are having now. What is the name of the Egyptian king, the title that is given to the Egyptian king in the Bible?
Pharaoh and Pharaoh.
Paro and Pharaoh. Right. Very good. Same thing. Okay. Again, I don't know enough Egyptian to say to comment about it, but that's not the main point. The main point is that the translators of the Septuagint, when they wanted to represent these names in the Hebrew, okay, they went for the f sound, even though the p sound was available for them. So it might be that they had, okay, it was actually for them the closer sound in this case. By the way, there are other names as such. Okay, for instance, if we already mentioned Pinchas, the son of the grandson of Aharon, we also have his grandfather on his mother's side, which is named Putiel in biblical Hebrew. But the Greek version of that, anyone wants to guess by now?
Who?
Very good. Futiel. Okay, you can see it written on screen. Futiel. They were transcribing a Hebrew name that we pronounce in the Hebrew as Putiel to Futiel, which means that both the sounds that we pronounce with the dagesh and without a dagesh were closer to the fi in their, I wouldn't say in their eyes, but in their ears to the p sound, to the pi sound. Okay, so it might have been that this was a kind of both subtle difference, or something that was in both cases not as hard a stop as the Greek letter f. Okay. Yes, Susanna?
Sorry, I'm full of questions with this stuff. But does that mean that, or actually, how was a Septuagint derived? Like, would they have had somebody recite Torah in Hebrew and then transcribe into Greek from oral? Or did they have manuscripts with no reading mothers or no dageshes? So they,
That's a good question. Uh, I think that mostly it was probably done from a text. There are some cases where you can see that copying was done, maybe even translation, from oral source. Someone reading it and someone listening. And you can sometimes tell when you have kind of a mistakes that would be more characteristic of an oral transmission rather than a graphic one. Okay. So that's, but usually copying. Again, you can tell by things that are based on parablepsis rather than oral, you know, oral difficulties. Okay, when I say oral, I mean with an O and an AU. That is from the mouth to the ear. So usually the mistakes are of the eye, not of the ear. And this is how you know a process was done by looking at a manuscript and copying or translating it. Are you with me, guys? I'm getting into deep stuff today.
well,
Very,
it just made a difference
it's
because,
not my fault. If you want your money back, go to Susanna. Yeah.
well, if I were transcribing from looking at it, I would have put pi instead of phi. But if I were
Right. And it
from hearing it, I might have put phi.
exactly, which teaches us that our pronunciation of the pay is probably different than that of the people who translated the Septuagint. So if we go back to the 2nd century, let's say, before the Common Era, which is roughly when the Septuagint is translated, we can learn that their pronunciation of the pay, even in cases where we would have the weak dagesh, would be probably not as hard p sound as we do it today. Does it mean that 500 years earlier, in the time of King Hezekiah and the prophet Isaiah, things were like they were 500 years later in the times of the translators of the Septuagint? Not necessarily. Can we say something about the pronunciation at that time? Yes, but as you can see, every time we have to talk about pronunciation in the ancient times, it's not directly because they did not leave us any recordings. They didn't use WhatsApp, so they didn't have the recordings or not even the big gramophones, nothing. So we have to kind of find ways to circumvent our discussion about spoken language based on written material, which is always I love it because it's like playing detective a little bit. Okay. Rosalind, your hand is up, and then Monica.
It's still up, yes. So in modern Hebrew, my understanding is that the Gimel and the Dalet are always pronounced G and D.
You are correct, and you can add to that list the Tav. Even if you're Ashkenazi, okay, in modern Hebrew speakers pronounce the Gimel Dalet and Tav exactly the same, whether they have a dagesh or not. Ashkenazi Jews traditionally do distinguish between the Tav if it has no Dagesh, they pronounce it as an S sound. But that's in modern Hebrew, only the letters Bet, Kaf, and Pei do preserve the two distinctive pronunciation of B, V, K, Ch, P, F. That is correct.
Thank you.
Yes. But since we're talking about the ways people read the Bible, that's
Different.
that's a little bit different. Again, it depends on the tradition and depends on other factors as well. So that's a little bit about the Dagesh, and when I say a little bit, I think that we've talked about it in an hour. So, or something not too far from that, or maybe 45 minutes. But again, it's not me. I was planning to talk about other things. Okay, so let's make the discussion about the names of the months or the system of the months shorter. And